Story 1. I broke my bike chain and fell off my bike, landing on the curb mouth first. I knocked out my top tooth, fractured my maxilla, and my bottom teeth ripped through my bottom lip, folded in, and were pointing into my mouth at an awkward angle. I was in shock at first, but when I got home and handed my sister my teeth, the pain set in and the blood began to flow. Story 2. I have torn the muscle between my ribs and had kidney stones. The worst was the tooth infection, followed by the muscle tear between my ribs. Story 3. Kidney stones have occurred twice in my life, and I would very much love to never experience that again. Story 4. I had a skin infection in Thailand where my skin started to rot. It was the most painful experience, having to remove my clothes only for my skin to slough off. Story 5. Gallstones. I have collapsed from severe pain on 2 occasions. Story 6. I was in a plane crash. I broke both legs, shattered a femur, and sustained broken ribs and a neck injury. I had to use my elbows to drag my twisted body out of the upside-down wreckage, with fuel and hot oil pouring on me. That hurt for a long time. However, getting soaked in military-grade pepper spray was extremely painful for a few hours. Story 7. Childbirth without medication can be challenging. The provider accidentally pulled at the stitches because the scissors were not sharp enough when she withdrew. We all cried in that office and she apologized frequently. Story 8. A 4-millimeter kidney stone had me lying on the sidewalk outside the hospital, screaming, crying, and vomiting. I am a 6'5", 230-pound construction worker. Story 9. I have deep cuts and broken bones, but every time I get a particularly awful Charlie horse, it surpasses that. Story 10. My tooth got infected in the middle of the night. I ran water in my mouth, and it was the only thing that helped at all. I would have taken any medication if it had been offered, even though I am not a drug user. Story 11. The worst physical pain is, without a doubt, appendicitis. I spent an entire night in agony and would never wish this on anyone. Story 12. Dry socket occurs when the blood clot falls out after wisdom teeth are removed, exposing the nerves, and it's not even close to what I expected. I didn't realize that's what it was. So for 5 days, I couldn't sleep more than an hour before the pain medication wore off. But it led to my favorite memory of my dad. I had the surgery when I was 21, home for the summer from college. My dad found me at 3 a.m. curled up on the floor and crying after trying to get an ice pack. When I told him that I couldn't fall asleep, he disappeared for a minute and came back with my favorite book from my childhood, The Secret Garden. Then he held me in his lap and read to me like I was a little girl again until I fell asleep. I woke up and realized I'd finally slept through the night for the first time in 5 days. When I turned, I saw my dad curled up on the floor next to me, the book still in his hand. He stayed there all night just in case I woke up again. Story 13. Physical. Kidney stones, 6 times. Emotional. The unexpected death of my first love after just 2 years of knowing her. Took a long time to get over that enough to move on. Story 14. Post-cesarean section and tubal ligation procedure. When the anesthesia started wearing off, it was an unimaginable pain. Story 15. I had a catheter 3 times in my life. I fell down the stairs with it and stepped on the tube, but nothing hurt more than when a brand new nurse did not deflate the balloon inside completely before trying to remove the catheter. The pain was so intense that I couldn't make a sound when I tried to. It was quite awful for a few seconds, and then it just burned. Story 16. Gout. I've endured intense pain in my chest and stomach. I've burned my hands and injured my thumb. I have numerous tattoos, and yet it's still gout. Nothing is worse than gout. Feels like you can't bear it, and it has complete control over you. Even the air causes discomfort. The weight of the past seems unbearable. The blanket is sheer torture. The solution I found was to refuse to let gout win, despite the risk of being debilitated by neuropathy. I overcame it. Story 17. I was walking around the house after a shower. My wife was doing dishes in the kitchen. She told me to get dressed so we could go out, although I didn't remember where. Otherwise, she said she would whip me with the kitchen towel. I turned around and playfully shook my backside at her. She whipped that wet towel at me, and it landed right in an unexpected place. Story 18. No joke. I thought my appendix had burst. I was in agony for hours and had to cut a date short. My partner at the time mentioned that her sister's appendix had burst and I had all the same symptoms. When I got home, I let out the longest, loudest gas I have ever produced. It was seriously impressive. The instant relief was incredible. Story 19. My urologist decided it was easier and faster to perform a cystoscopy in his office without local or general anesthesia. He was screening for bladder stones. I have a fairly high pain tolerance, but nothing prepares you for what I felt. Story 20. Endometriosis. I have several other health issues, but even so, it is the most painful of them all. Story 21. Cluster headaches, also known as suicide headaches, make me want to slice the side of my head with a razor blade to relieve the pressure. Story 22. The miscarriage of our last IVF embryo was incredibly difficult. My wife experienced physical pain, but the emotional pain was even worse. I have lost parents, but this was unlike anything I had ever felt. On a positive note, we did have one baby. He is an amazing 3-year-old. We desperately wanted to give him a brother, but it didn't happen. It is a strange feeling to be in love with someone you have never met. Story 23. Infected tooth. Throbbing, persistent pain that intensified to the point where it felt as if my nerves were fatigued from constantly signaling for pain. I now understand why some people pull out their own teeth. Story 24. I just had to leave my 12-year-old autistic son at the hospital for an inpatient stay for his mental health. I have had countless surgeries, injuries, kidney stones, and complex regional pain syndrome, also known as the suicide disease. I would take any of that pain over this heartbreak any day. Story 25. Waking up from open heart surgery. I vividly remember being moved shortly after waking up and being rolled on a board. It was the most horrific pain I have ever felt. Then I had to stand and move to a chair in the intensive care unit. It felt like minutes in between, but it could have been hours or days. I have no clue. After that, I had drainage tubes removed and the external pacemaker taken out. I even vomited from the pain medication. It was an absolutely horrific experience. If I had to choose between giving birth and going through that again, I would choose to give birth. Story 26. Labor contractions, giving birth without any pain relievers, putting my 16-year-old dog to sleep, and discovering that my husband is gay and cheated on me. All of these experiences affected me deeply. I cannot say which hurt more, as they each impacted different parts of my life. Story 27. I have undergone 2 cervix binding surgeries and 2 cesarean sections. I also broke my elbow as a child and suffered multiple deep cuts that required stitches. However, nothing hurt as much as the burn I received on my calf from a stage bulb while on stilts. The skin swelled with fluid, and it was painful for days. It left a noticeable scar as well. Story 28. Having gallstones while pregnant with a large baby boy was challenging. I went to the emergency room at 13 weeks pregnant, thinking I was having a miscarriage, and spent 2 hours sobbing in a chair waiting to be called after pleading with the staff to admit me. They eventually admitted me, and this was during the peak of COVID-19, so the staff was overwhelmed dealing with the sickness everywhere. After several hours, they informed me that the baby was fine and that it was my gallbladder causing the issue. They contacted my doctor, who said there was no way to operate on me. I was sent home with Tylenol and advised to walk it off and manage the pain. I spent the remainder of that pregnancy caring for my 1.5-year-old daughter and preparing for my husband's deployment a couple of months after the baby was born. Looking back, I often shrug and think, it was hard, but I survived. Reflecting on it now, I realize that the experience is etched in my memory. Every night, I walked in circles around our house, bending over in pain, while our sweet cats trailed behind me. Samuel was born a healthy baby boy, and as of this past February, he is nearly 4 feet tall and 4 years old. Story 29. I don't even know what the pain was from, but it was in my lower abdomen and the sensation was so intense I could barely move. It drained me of all my energy but only lasted about an hour. Story 30. Chronic akathisia is an indescribable, relentless torment, both mental and physical. Every second, you feel as though you want to crawl out of your skin while experiencing the worst panic attack of your life. Story 31. The first time I was asked to stand up and walk to the hospital shower after my cesarean section the day before, I almost passed out. Story 32. Physically, childbirth involved an emergency cesarean section after over 24 hours of labor because the baby would not come out properly. Emotionally, it was my grandparents' and pets' deaths. Story 33. Seeing my tattooed, strong, independent dad, who lifts weights every day, cry because he can't speak or move his right side after his stroke 2 months ago is heartbreaking. This is the third time I have ever seen him cry in my 35 years, and not being able to alleviate his suffering has affected me deeply. Story 34. A kidney stone was stuck in my ureter, causing the most excruciating pain I have ever experienced. I ended up needing emergency surgery. I would rather endure anything than experience that again. Story 35. I have a resistance to lidocaine. I discovered this when I was about 17 and getting a tooth pulled. The dentist didn't believe me when I told him I wasn't numb. The contractions and the aftermath of my cesarean section didn't even come close to that pain. Story 36. I herniated 2 discs in my lower back while lifting at work. I passed out when it happened and couldn't walk for 3 weeks. For a couple of months, I had to bend over to the side. A week later, while lying on a makeshift bed downstairs, I sneezed and passed out from the pain again. I have broken many bones and experienced various injuries from extreme sports, but nothing compares to this. Story 37. Definitely should be the spinal damage that causes migraines, but that comes with a dissociative, numbing aura. The most intense, unyielding pain was from consuming a Carolina Reaper pepper. It wasn't just the capsaicin irritating me. It was the raw acid and bile from my stomach. Along with it came severe gastrointestinal distress. My body continued to reject its former contents well past being empty, resulting in dry heaving. Contractions continued for hours as I sweated on the toilet or lay exhausted on the floor. That's as close to childbirth as I'll come. Less stretching and tearing, more chemical burns, but no joy following delivery. Story 38. Migraine. I pray to a God I don't believe in to send the angel of death to end it all. I feel nauseous. I struggle to breathe. My vision is nearly gone, but it doesn't matter because I have to keep my eyes closed. This happens about once a year. It may seem dramatic, but I genuinely wish for relief. Story 39. Physical was kidney stones. Beyond the physical was the time I failed to stop my 2-year-old daughter from hitting a tree while sledding, and she collided with it headfirst. I will always carry her screams in my mind. Thankfully, although her skull was fractured, she did not sustain any brain injury and eventually fully recovered. However, I will never forgive myself for not moving faster. Story 40. When doctors tried to remove my crystallized urinary stent that had been left in me for 2 months, I bled extensively. It felt like 100 blades cutting my insides each time they pulled it out. Story 41. Losing people I loved, both to death and in life, or having a chopstick impale my foot as a child, or the electrical test for cerebral palsy they gave me when I was young. I still have medical post-traumatic stress disorder from those tests. Story 42. I was struck in the arm by a hockey ball traveling at full speed, right where the arm joins the hand and the side of the wrist protrudes. There is no padding in that area. I have never experienced anything like it. It required 9 screws and a metal plate to fix it. I have had 2 labors and births without any pain medication. Nothing compares to that broken arm. Story 43. Neuropathic pain is the most intense form of pain. Why endure the agony of burning your skin or breaking your limbs when you can simply damage your central nervous system and experience all those sensations? Story 44. Blistering sunburn covered my entire back. I am of Irish descent and very pale, so even moderate sunburns tend to sting a lot, but this was on an entirely different level. I was 12 years old and wanted desperately for the pain to stop. Story 45. I had gallstones, and the pain from the first attack caused me to fall over and curl up into a ball. Story 46. I was involved in a car accident and injured my hip. My boyfriend recently passed away, which caused stress that triggered flare-ups of my stroke symptoms. I also experienced severe pain and vertigo, making me feel as though I might pass out. Story 47. Mast cell disease flare-ups, specifically mastocytic enterocolitis, can lead to anaphylaxis, with the most significant discomfort experienced in the gut. The excruciating pain may leave you questioning your survival, and the adrenaline rushes provide little relief. Story 48, in order, I guess. 1. Sexual assault with a foreign object. 2. Childbirth. 3. Neuralgia paresthetica in both legs, still not fully healed. 4. An abscess in the back of my mouth caused my jaw to lock up and my throat to close. An emergency room doctor forced a long needle between my teeth, which scraped against them, and stabbed the back of my throat to pop the abscess. Later, I had a tonsillectomy and never experienced abscesses again. Story 49. Having a stent placed after impacted kidney stones were removed during surgery was quite uncomfortable. The stones were difficult, but the stent proved to be even worse, and I had it in for 6 weeks. Story 50. Craniotomy. The pain of waking up after brain surgery and vomiting while feeling your skull in multiple pieces is the worst I've experienced. Story 51. Endometriosis, specifically the day my period starts. I have had kidney stones, hives, and nothing compares to that kind of pain. Story 52. When I was undergoing chemotherapy, I would receive an injection the day after the infusion to stimulate my bone marrow to produce more immune cells, so I wouldn't constantly be at risk of neutropenia and in danger of dying from a minor cold. Having your entire skeleton hurt is a unique kind of suffering. The literal bone aching could only be alleviated by very hot showers and prescription pain medications. Story 53. Scrubbing an open wound with an alcohol-based preparation before suturing myself closed, all without anesthetic, was truly mind-numbing. The pain from the preparation was more intense than that of major surgery, although the pain from the surgery lasted much longer and was only slightly less severe. Story 54. During my gynecological exam, the doctor used an extra-large speculum instead of a small speculum. This caused me to bleed for 3 days and was extremely painful. Story 55. You might find this interesting, but fibromyalgia is quite painful. It's not only the intensity of the pain, it spreads throughout your body, making it hard to pinpoint where it hurts. No matter what you do, it's a persistent pain that remains. Acute pain from an infection or a broken bone is also difficult to endure, and I don't underestimate how painful those experiences can be. However, imagine feeling extensive pain throughout your body because your nervous system has gone haywire. I spent more than 15 days in bed in pain, barely accomplishing anything useful other than working on my computer when a crisis hit. Externally, nothing appears to be wrong, and nothing you do seems to help during a crisis. You simply wait, take some medication, which often loses effectiveness over time as your body learns to ignore it, and try to avoid crises as much as possible. Story 56. That one period cramp I had in spring 2015 made me freeze. I couldn't breathe or move. I was in class and feared I would drool because my mouth was agape. Probably didn't last more than 5 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I have experienced other painful things like a knee injury and a broken toe, but when you stop moving or touching them, the pain stops. With that cramp, there was nothing I could do to stop it. I could only beg for it to end soon. Since then, I have never had cramps as bad as that one. It still hurts significantly, but it is not paralyzing. Story 57. Seeing the pain my girlfriend experiences with trigeminal neuralgia is the worst pain I have felt. I often sit in my car and cry because I don't know how to help her. Story 58. A gallbladder attack at 3 a.m. was excruciating. I wanted to gouge my eyes out and light myself on fire simultaneously. No position was comfortable to lie down or sit in, and I was writhing in pain until I managed to wake a family member and get into the car to go to the emergency room. I was in emergency surgery the next day. Story 59. Perianal abscess. It developed gradually as the abscess grew larger. The pain was excruciating. Right before I was leaving for the emergency room, I discovered a way to prop myself up on one foot with my other foot extended, which slightly reduced the pain. I was frozen, afraid to move because I knew it would hurt so much. I swore that if the emergency room couldn't fix it, I would jump off a bridge. I'm not cut out for that level of pain. To those living with chronic pain, I admire your resilience. I'm not that tough. They administered medication and drained the abscess. I must have thanked the doctor numerous times. Story 60. Collapsed lung surgery. I needed to be awake for the procedure. They made an incision near my ribcage and gave me some morphine, assuring me that I wouldn't feel a thing. When they tried to insert the tube, it felt like someone had shoved a knife into my chest and was wiggling it around. I was in so much pain that I ripped the arm restraint off the bed. It was the worst pain I have ever experienced. On a side note, the way I collapsed my lung was unusual. A few years ago, I contracted COVID-19 and started feeling a bubbling sensation when I breathed. I had x-rays done and they said everything was fine. A year later, my condition worsened, and I went to urgent care thinking I was dying. It turned out that COVID-19 had collapsed my lung, and the previous doctor who performed the x-ray had missed it. It's important to advocate for yourself at the doctor's office. I knew something was wrong, but they told me it was just stress. Story 61. Gout is the worst condition. I would have preferred to give birth to my son than experience it. Story 62. I had a 36-hour labor during which I experienced an allergic reaction to the epidural, preventing me from using it. Ultimately, I ended up with a cesarean section because the baby was positioned incorrectly. Story 63. Having an embedded intrauterine device removed from my uterus was one of the most painful experiences I've had. I've undergone surgery where half my face was peeled off, been hit by a car, and dealt with a cyst deep within my eyeball. All those experiences were difficult, but none compared to the pain of having my intrauterine device removed. Story 64. Pancreatitis. The medication in the hospital was barely able to control it, so they had to sedate me. Story 65. Trigeminal neuralgia is a condition where the damaged nerve is constantly misfiring. Feels like being stabbed repeatedly. Nerve blocks help to alleviate the pain. I would prefer to avoid returning to an unmanaged state of suffering. Story 66. My periods are extremely heavy. If I sit down for longer than 30 minutes, I can leave bloody footprints, making it resemble a horror movie. I have to sleep on an underpad because regular pads are ineffective. Super Plus tampons last me only 30 minutes to an hour, but thankfully the menstrual cup lasts me between 3 to 4 hours. I experience large blood clots, sometimes the size of silver dollars, and I have faced nausea, fainting, and sweating from cramps. I have also passed uterine casts, which are quite unpleasant. I have polycystic ovary syndrome, and my insurance does not cover a hysterectomy, despite the severity of my symptoms. It's incomprehensible. I dislike birth control and refuse to utilize the skip week method, as I do not want to have my period. I haven't had one in nearly a year. I tried an intrauterine device, but I removed it myself because the pain was unbearable. I screamed during its insertion. Women's pain is often not taken seriously in the medical field, even by other women. Story 67. Chigger bites are present on both legs. If you told me that setting my legs on fire would make me feel better, I wouldn't challenge you. Story 68. 8 broken ribs, a dislocated left shoulder, a cracked vertebra in the spine, and the loss of 5 teeth were sustained alongside a major concussion from a motorcycle accident at 125 miles per hour. Story 69. Shingles on my back between my shoulder blades. Additionally, I have had a full abdominal aortic aneurysm repair, non-small cell lung cancer with an ALK gene alteration, lobectomy, compression fractures, nerve damage, and both knees operated on. Story 70. Throughout my life, I have experienced intense lower back spasms that left me immobile for days, and they continue to occur. Additionally, I endured severe menstrual cramps and significant blood clots during my teenage years. Both of these experiences have made me wish for relief. Story 71. When my fallopian tube burst due to an ectopic pregnancy, the hospital thought I had appendicitis. There is no pain on earth like your insides being ripped apart and bleeding internally. I was screaming for help from the storage closet they had put me in to wait. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.